Derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Friday, March 23rd, 2018. Joining us on the line right now, Duane Rollins, and as well Steven Sandor, to talk about YEG for CPL, a big event that happened earlier this week. First of all, good morning, Steven.
Morning.
Stephen, as Kevin just said, there was an event in Edmonton last night. I was watching you a little bit on the Twitters, responding to that. Some people on the Twitters last night. I just like saying the word the Twitters, but at any rate, just give us a general overview of how the night went from your perspective.
Yeah, it was night. I guess officially night one, unofficially night two of Paul Byrne's 3-day visit here in Edmonton. I think this is a big push by the Canadian Premier League and by the YEG for CanPL group to really bring this together, to really even bring more visibility to that movement, to bring more awareness to the club and what CPL will be, or CanPL, whatever abbreviation you want to use, for 2019. Paul Byrne held a town hall at one of the soccer centers in Edmonton last night. It was well attended. I think there's maybe 100 or so people there. Different people from the soccer community, not necessarily the same people we see go to all the supporters events, which was a good thing. And I find just personally that Paul, when he is in a group like that, I'm not sure if it was the same way in the Toronto town halls. He may be a little bit less cautious in terms of the way he talks about CanPL and such. I think when the recorders are on, there's a room of media rather than a room of supporters. Obviously, I think he becomes a little bit more cautious, and I think he was a little bit less cautious last night in putting sort of the grand sort of brushstrokes on what he thinks CanPL will be. And he said a lot of very rah, very ring up the flag kind of things, and he also really talked about how much very different, and I think we're seeing more and more. I don't like to use the term anti-MLS because I don't think it's going to be a case of CanPL versus MLS. I don't think it should be, but I think that's going to get brought up more and more. That it seems that whatever MLS does is what CanPL is not going to do.
Interesting. You had a tweet that intrigued me, and I made a joke about it last night, but it does intrigue me from a literal sect that he said it would be more like the K-League or the J-League than it would be MLS. Did he expand any more on that? Do you have any theories on what he meant by that?
He said just that MLS is not necessarily a great example because that's not where not really where they're looking. He said that the J-League and the K-League are good examples because they're both fairly new first divisions, in his words, that were kind of plopped on top of the pyramid because those countries needed a first division to go on top of the pyramid. And those leagues are very, they stress playing domestic players at a much higher level than MLS does. The J-League and the K-League, the Japanese content in the J-League is much higher than the American content you find in MLS right now. So he said in terms of a well-developed country finally deciding it needs to, again, using that term, plop a league on top of its pyramid, that analogy to J-League and K-League to what's happening in Asia is probably far more, he said, apt than us looking towards MLS. I think he's being very careful because he wants people not to think that we're going to have designated players coming in year one into Canada. So I think you got to temper those expectations to what's going to be realistic. And I think by saying that, he's kind of laying it down what the league is there for. And this is a much sort of I guess in terms of what they're looking forward to is they want this to develop less because they have to make sort of rules and gimmicks to make it go along the way. They want this to develop organically like a league would in other parts of the world.
Steven, picture me as a fan of soccer from Edmonton. A few weeks, like a month or so ago, Tom Pfaff gave some quotas of potential tickets, potential what the support could look like for him to bring a Canadian Premier League team to Edmonton, or for a soccer team to be viable in the market. What has changed since then? And if I'm a soccer fan, how can I be convinced if I need to be? Steven.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. If I'm a Canadian Premier League supporter in Edmonton, and a few months ago, when Tom Pfaff mentioned that the example of support they would need for him to bring a team to Edmonton, what has changed since then?
Honestly, not much has changed. I mean, that's still there. I mean, you're still going to have to show the support. I think what people need to understand, too, is that Tom had laid out, it's not just about the number of fans. Like, I think one of the big struggles FC Edmonton always had in NASL, was a perceived lack of corporate support. When was the last time FC Edmonton had a sponsor of the jersey that was paying for it? I mean, they had the Sears Financial the first couple of years, and then it went away. Where is there a large corporation buying groups of tickets for FC Edmonton matches or such? So I think that corporate support is also something, and I think by creating awareness and getting into the message to the city and such, is making people understand that FC Edmonton is not just about that core group of fans that comes out and grows, but doesn't grow at an exponential rate. I mean, supporters groups grow at a nice organic rate, but they don't necessarily explode and mushroom overnight. So I think you have to cross into that mainstream. At some point, FC Edmonton and soccer in markets outside of the 3 MLS markets has got to cross over into the mainstream, where it becomes something that we talk about, that we become something that the casual sports fan, we always bring up that term, the casual sports fan, will go to a couple times a year to check it out. And if you have enough of those people, then you're doing well enough. So in terms of season ticket goals, the team has not put a hard target on it. I mean, they talked about, like, they wanted to get 1,000 at a certain level. They said that the memberships, and they're working on the membership model now. The memberships are now higher than their season ticket sales were for their final year in NASL, which is positive. But I think, for a team that needs to come back, they really need to show what's going on. And I mean, it's hard to judge. And I had this discussion last night with several supporters. It's hard to judge how far this goes in terms of how far along Edmonton is, because there's nothing to really compare it to. There's not really a season ticket drive being held or a membership drive being held by any of the other prospective CanPL supporters groups or teams. So really, we're kind of out in the wilderness on this in terms of, are we setting a benchmark? Is it good? Is it bad? We don't really know. I think that's the thing, because we don't really say, oh, well, Hamilton sold this many tickets, or Winnipeg sold this many tickets, or other markets, Calgary, there's a lot of interest. The fan sports are getting together and they've developed a membership buy-in. We don't know, and I think that being out in the wilderness is exactly what makes it a hard thing to quantify.
How was the feeling from the supporters last night at the event? How is their excitement level? They're really high, really low. They're nervous. They have doubts. How did the fans react last night?
No, the excitement you can really tell. I mean, I think there's still some questions and doubts about certain things around the league, like I think any fan would have. But I think as a rule, the excitement level to be in a Canadian league now, and you have to understand this was a flip. They didn't feel that way a year and a half, 2 years ago. There was still a lot of loyalty towards NASL, or being in that league and already being up and running and existing and not wanting to start again. But I think over the last 2 years, there's been a huge reversal, and there's been a real move to understanding that this is where they want to be. And I think that even started before the NASL, for all intents and purposes, ended. I think there was a real understanding that it would be better. I mean, I think Paul totally understands how to work an Edmonton crowd. I think, a couple of times he talked about promotion relegation. He said, boy, you guys are going to celebrate the day Calgary gets relegated, and everyone cheers. So the working that and playing up the local rivalries. And I think it was brought up several times that how important it's going to be for that Calgary-Edmonton rivalry. And it was brought up by one of the supporters groups. I think it was Dallas from the CanPL for YEG group. So it belongs to him. I would never claim ownership of the term, but he said, the Edmonton-Calgary rivalry is going to be called Al Clasico. And I'm not going to change it. I think that's awesome, but that's not mine. But I want everyone to use it.
Fair enough, Stephen. Did we get any more indication? I know you spoke to Paul a little bit on the side as well in terms of when we might finally get some more confirmations in terms of teams and things like that.
Yeah, well, I think now what Paul said yesterday, and I think that's probably the best way to go about it, is that they're going to have clarity of how many teams are going to start and where the league's going to be in June of this year. So around the time of the World Cup vote, they're going to know exactly who's in, who's out, who's not ready. Now, Paul had said that there's about 20 markets or 20 owners. There, some of the markets are overlapping. Obviously, you can imagine some of the cities have more than one potential group. The 20 is he actually said for an office as small as theirs, it's hard to deal with because there's just so many applications in front of them right now, and so that's actually a bit of an issue in terms of speeding the process up to be able to vet all of these potential owners and such, and seeing who's actually gonna make it in and who's not gonna make it in. I think that's part of the thing, and this process is slow, and maybe because I'm around the FC Edmonton situation pretty closely, and I speak to the CanPL people fairly regularly. I know some of the fans are frustrated by what they feel is the lack of progress. I guess I don't see it that way. I actually see a lot of progress from week to week. It's just that it's a lot of little steps here and there and here and there and here and there. And so I'm not nearly as cynical as I think some that I see on, the world of social media about, the perceived lack of announcements and such. I think they're in that final stretch and they're making sure they're doing their due diligence and getting it done right. But I've come to realize stadium deals are extremely complex on that side, and they never come together easily. Even if you think that you're renting a city facility that holds 5,000 people and it's not that big a deal, it's still huge in terms of what times you get it, what allocations you have, when your training times. All of those things are huge to put together, and it takes time. I think they're looking big. They want to be at, they said 16 teams by 2026, and then you have the promotion relegation discussion. Well, it's not a discussion. They're just going to start it when they are, because they've already decided they are going to have promotion relegation when they get to a certain size and start a second division. So it's all part of the plan. It's all going forward. I'm a bit more positive, I think, than others right now. Maybe I have to be, being in Edmonton, and this really being the way that we're looking towards the future of soccer in the city. That it's a pretty exciting thing. But I think the framework is set, and I think the biggest perception that Paul and CanPL and everyone's got to deal with is still sort of a perception. I got that from some of the people at that meeting last night, that we're a second division, or this is going to be a second division or a third division or a minor league, and they really got to get over that perception and tell that it won't be.
I think it's Stephen, the nature of Canadians to be defeatist when it comes to sports in general. So that's probably where some of this is coming from. Speaking of that, I'm wondering, the other issue in Edmonton soccer, obviously, is they're part of the United 2026 bid. We're hearing not great things about the 2026 bid, but what is the perception of that in Edmonton? Is there some of the resistance, some of the sort of pushback that we're seeing and what we saw in Vancouver that we're starting to see amongst national media?
I think the Alberta government decided not to fund at this moment, and then they said that they weren't going to fund for 2026. Their issue is a lot more complex than in Vancouver. It's not ideological like Vancouver was. Vancouver was much on, this is what FIFA does, and we're not going to agree to what FIFA does, and we only run the stadium. In other markets, they didn't need provincial approval because the province doesn't run the stadiums. It doesn't run the stadium in Edmonton, the city does. So all they need was the city and the federal approval. But in Alberta, eventually, the provincial government, I think those dialogues, the discussion from talking to the mayor, from talking to city council, still going to be ongoing. And there is a feeling that, obviously the bigger issue for the Alberta government is Calgary 2026 is also possibly looming. And so, where are you going to bring money here? How much would you give to Calgary? How much would you give to Edmonton? It becomes like, how do you divide the family, wealth between your two favorite children? And they're both bidding for major events in 2026. So that plays a lot into it. That's definitely not an issue for the other cities. On the ground, you don't hear that kind of, and without sounding too much of like an Albertan, I think people here on the street talk about Vancouver's resistance as going BC's going to be BC again, trying to be the moral stoplight for everybody in Canada, and rolling their eyes, because that's just the way it is right now between Alberta and BC, between the provinces as a whole. So, almost BC's rejection is almost an endorsement for Alberta, because right now, the tensions between the province politically, on every level, it's very much, and you have to be out here to sort of understand that, that it's almost like anything BC does is Alberta says that's endorsement to do the other thing, and vice versa. So I think on the ground, you still get a very strong sense of where it's at. I think what I find the average Edmontonian is not educated about is really what games we're getting. Like, they're still asking me questions like, could we get a final or a semifinal here? No, that's not in the day. And that's where that's
gonna happen.
That split cuts in.
Yeah, never gonna happen. But it's kind of interesting though.
There's a feeling though that I think here, and it's a funny thing. Is that Edmonton is somehow going to get the lion's share of everything from the Canadian side of the bid, and it is it's only gotten stronger. But I think I don't even think that people are really aware of what the bidding process is, or that Morocco's even bidding. I think I think a lot of people, for a lot of intents and purposes, are thinking it's full steam ahead for 2026. So the attitude here is, we don't get a lot of that negativity, and honestly, like, a lot of the stuff that was in the document that I think BC and some of the American cities were resistant to, Albertans, I mean, the general feeling here is that common sense will prevail, and that stuff is stuff that can be worked through. I can't imagine, and maybe that's my naivete, I can't imagine that, like, the people who will have to put grass in the Commonwealth Stadium will be working minimum wage, and there'll be migrant workers brought in to do that. I think it'll probably be city employees or a unionized company that will be doing that. But maybe that's my naivete. I think you can put that stuff on paper, but I don't think that's going to be the practice. There's no way they could deal with that sort of PR mess. So yeah, I don't know, but I in terms of the agreement itself, but the federal government supports it, and therefore the city feels pretty comfortable being where it's at right now.
Just before we say goodbye for today, Stephen, I'm going to ask this question to you again next time we talk about FC Edmonton and Canadian Premier League. But as of this morning, March 23rd, 2018, YEG for CPL, yay or nay?
I think I'm going to say that I think in April, on opening weekend, either it will be in Calgary or in Edmonton. The league will kick off here locally. Our first game will be an Al Clasico between Calgary and Edmonton. That's what I'll say. I just get the feeling that that's the way it's going to be, and I think that's going to be the way to sort of start this league with a bang, at least for this region, obviously, is to do a first Battle of Alberta game to start the season off, first regular season game, and I think it's going to be. I'm going to put on my rah hat. I think this year, and it's going to feel like no NSL game did. I think it's going to be really exciting, and I think it'll come together. I think that there's just too much at stake. In ways, the risk is still, even as much as a lot at stake. The risk is a lot lower in a Canadian league than it is playing in an American league, especially in a league like USL or NASL. I think, being in a Canadian league where you don't have to worry about currency exchanges, you don't have to worry about crossing borders. Once a guy's got a work visa to work in Canada, he's good to play the whole season. You don't have to worry about paperwork to get into the United States or vice versa. I think all of those things make it a lower risk venture and will be more attractive and will make it easier for teams that have been through it, like Edmonton or Ottawa, to make a move. So I think this will come to pass. I'm really hopeful and I'm really excited. I know there's some boisterous people on the FC Edmonton side, and I know the GM of the team, Jay Ball. He talked about a couple months ago that the great comeback story will be finished when this Edmonton wins the first CanPL championship in 2019. I think that's a lot of bluster, and I think that's great at this stage. You need to have that, and I think it will be go forward. I think this will pick up, and it seems that once you start telling people the story about what CanPL is supposed to be, they get it. They understand why, and they understand the reasons for it. I think it's going to be a good thing for the country.
We'll have the banjo derby and the El Clasico as a doubleheader to kick off the league. You figure that works? Yeah,
the banjo. You can't call it the Banjo Bowl, I guess, but we'll have like something. Yeah, and then the El Clasico, and I think there's gonna be a number of Toronto ones down the road, right? Like whatever you're gonna want to call that. I did. It was funny. I think Paul mentioned yesterday that his dream is one day that that his neighborhood out in the beaches area is going to have a team, and that there'll be a team again that they'll play Parkdale, and I'm like, oh, that's going to be great.
The QEW, the QEW Derby,
Battle, Lakeshore Boulevard, whatever. I don't know what you want to call that, but I think that the excitement of having a CanPL team. Or regionally dotted through places is in various cities having more than one team. And one thing that's been brought up a couple times has been mentioned is their long-term vision is that Edmonton will have more than one team. They see that Edmonton's going to have at least two. Wow. That's a long-term vision. That's not a 2019 thing. It's not a 2022 thing. It's maybe 2026 and on. But they imagine that Edmonton's a large enough city that will have more than one team.
Real quickly, I think that one of the dreams that I like with the fact that they're launching with the idea of getting to two divisions in ProRel is that the possibility of a city like Kingston or Belleville, even where I grew up, might have like second division teams down the line. That's not that far-fetched. I like that idea, and I'm glad that they're launching with that. I think most people understand that it's a good thing that they launched with the ProRel model in mind down the road.
I agree with you, and to be like the only sort of major league team in a lot of those markets where you could say, hey, we have a team in these places that may have 200,000 people or so, but to say, hey, we got to get 5,000 people into a building, every couple of weeks, it's not that much of big of an ask. And, I think the community would rally around it if they say, hey, in Canadian terms, for those cities, it would be no different than the feeling Toronto gets or Vancouver gets when they get to be in a league with New York and Chicago. It will be like, hey, we got invited into the table with the big boys, right? And I think there's going to be a sense of pride in that, and I think that's I think that'll play. I think that will play to be able to get into places that it would be like, wow, we're getting a real like pro first division team. We'll be very exciting.
All right, Stephen, 11.ca, thanks for your time today. Well, we'll let you go because we know you're a busy man, but thanks again. We'll talk down the line very soon, I'm sure.
Thank you.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. A lot of great stuff from Steven Sandor this morning. Duane, first of all, if I ask you this question on March 23rd, 2018, YEG for CPL, yay or nay?
I don't think there's any chance that they don't start in the league. I mean, look, I think that Mr. Faith was sick of losing money, and he needs to be convinced that he wants to continue on with this. But as you hear about, hundreds of people showing up, and what I liked about the report from that is it wasn't just, 25-year-old. Not that these guys aren't important. I want to be clear about that. They're our listeners. It's not that it was just a bunch of 20-somethings and 30-somethings and, Peter Pan folks like myself that are waving flags and drinking some beer and going out and hoping for a team to watch. It was also just stakeholders within the soccer community that were showing up. So it wasn't the same crowd. And that gives me hope more than if it was just another supporters kind of thing, because we can rely on the supporters to want this and to be fighting for it. You need to reach out and find the more general audience. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, like potential sponsors and other stuff like that to make sure that those people were in attendance and are already maybe part of that solution, the hype. And if I have a soccer shop in Edmonton or a few, and the same for other cities, and I see the rise of Canadian soccer in my city and the potential of Canadian Premier League, I would get involved as well. And that's what we are maybe seeing in Edmonton. Maybe sponsors and corporate partners are answering the call.
Yeah, well, that's what we absolutely need. And look, I think one of the advantages, when Edmonton's playing in a league with Puerto Rico in it, and with and Stephen talked about this before, and OKC and teams that are nowhere near their local businesses, how do you get a sponsorship? Because I think that their shirt sponsorships, your boards around the stands and all that are going to be a little locally sort of funded here. But if you have Canadian companies and you have the ability to attract your Tim Hortons, we were joking about this last night. I said that I made a joke on Twitter last night is because he said it was going to be K-League like in its structure. If you've ever followed the K-League, you know that all of their teams have they're like Hyundai.FC, right? They have like corporate names. They go way to the extreme. So we were joking about that and saying, like the Tim Hortons, Timbits FC and Suncor Atletico and stuff like that. But that's real. That if you have a national Canadian league, just like you see in the CFL, see, one of the major sponsors of the CFL is Steel
and Rona.
Like tractor. The CFL has a national tractor contract, right? Like they can attract stuff like that, which helps them financially. Whereas in the NASL, too many N's, they weren't able to do that. They weren't able to get that sponsorship there because there was no benefit to the sponsors. Whereas Edmonton playing Toronto, Hamilton, Ottawa, those Canadian companies get benefit from that, particularly if they can get visibility with some kind of television platform out there. And that, I think, is the big challenge. The biggest challenge that they face is to get this league on TV somewhere. And I know people are going to say, I'll just put it on the web. And they will have that option, clearly. There will be some ability to watch it. But I think they need to have a click. This is on my TV if they're truly going to reach their highest potential.
No, I agree. And just to say an example of what you were talking about, I know you have watched the Briar, the curling tournament national here in Canada, and it was in Regina this year, I believe. And you had like every commercial, you had agricultural commercials, big companies that I've never heard of before. But because it was in Regina, because it was in the prairies, and you had that aspect to it, they know a lot of people from Canada from the prairies are going to watch that, and they had a bunch of local sponsors advertising nationally, paying the big bucks to advertise nationally to get the local support. And we might have that exact scenario repeat itself in the CanPL.
Precisely. And that matters, that they have a national audience now, that they can sort of attract national sponsorship. And a local company that has aspirations to go national might be attracted to be involved as well. I mean, locally, and obviously Edmonton, Suncor, that's the oil sands in Fort McMurray, one of the major companies up there. There's a bunch of them. I mean, those oil companies might be inclined to get involved in Calgary, Edmonton. You look at Rexall, obviously, is a huge corporate headquarters in Edmonton. There's lots of that sort of example out there of companies that aren't North American focused that would get limited benefit to sponsoring even an MLS team, really, but would get some more benefit from being exposed to everyday Canadians, which are their customers. So I think that actually is an advantage, not a disadvantage to this league in the beginning. It's kind of the boring aspect of this conversation. We all want to talk about what cities they'll be in and how they'll allocate players in the beginning and stuff like that. That's important, but really business stuff is key.
And I think that's why what Stephen was mentioning, some fans, and we have those comments go our way last year and times before when, not a lot of news, it trickles out slowly. Well, It's not like the NASL, or I'm just using the NASL because it's the latest example of a league that folds. But it's not like you're creating a league out of nowhere in 2 weeks and you're just putting a bunch of millions of dollars and you say it's gonna work, and then 5 years later you fold. No, if you want to build a solid structure, foundation is important. Why do you think the pyramids are still standing? Because they're a lot wider at the base than it is on top. And that's the foundation. And I think the CPL is doing this. And just that example, there's 4 or 5 people in the office right now of the Canadian Premier League. And when you're looking at this amount of people, just 20 applications, yeah, they're swamped. So it does, when you're looking at it realistically and at the right scale, it's not like looking at Major League Soccer or the NFL with an office of 5,000 people. I'm exaggerating, but to illustrate the point, you do have that feeling that, yes, things are going to trickle down slowly, but this is made for it to ensure its stability and its viability on a time period, and not just for a flash in the pan of 2 years and then it goes away.
Yes, precisely. And look, and to end it with Edmonton, for any Edmonton listeners out there, I got to say this very carefully, but I have seen physical, concrete evidence that Edmonton is in the plans for launch. So there you go. It's that's the most detail I can give you with that. But I would be highly shocked if Edmonton is not among the charter teams of this league, based on what I've been told and what I've literally seen. Yep. So all right,
let's move to the Z-Man. Let's talk about Z Nation for a second. Let's talk about the Zlatan. The man himself bought a whole page. Well, it's followed the Galaxy, but to be fair, the whole page was bought in the LA Times this morning saying, "Dear LA, you're welcome. He's on his way. It's for real, Zlatan." Now the question, Duane, since yesterday we had a chance to think about Zlatan in LA. Is it a right fit? Sporting-wise? Butts in the seat-wise? Is Zlatan going to be able to do the one job that all their DPs cannot do right now, which is fill the stadium?
Yeah, look, first off, that ad is very much sort of teaches you what this is signing really means in a lot of ways, in the sense of the markability of it. And there was a massive photograph of him on the front page of the sports section of the LA Times as well. They still move the needle. These big characters, these big stars, they still move the needle. I've said before in the past that the reason MLS is never going to completely fight off the retirement league label is because the league head office, although they'll never admit it out loud, kind of wants them to be that a little bit, because these guys do in fact sell tickets and do in fact make the league money. And you can sort of sniff at that and dismiss it, and dismiss its importance. But the reality is, without making money, you can't also have the ability to have TAM in the system that then allows you to go out and get those young South American players. It's a balance, and I don't mind it, as I've said before too. There is something about we aren't, unlike the NBA, or the NHL or the NFL or Major League Baseball, where we do have the best athletes in the world, which right on our doorstep all the time. Soccer's not like that here. The best athletes in the world are in Europe, and the only way that we're going to see them in the flesh is if they come over at the end of their career right now. That's just the reality. And I, as a soccer fan, enjoy watching David Villa right now. I enjoyed watching Henry. I enjoyed even watching Beckham. There is something to that. And until this league is able to attract those guys in their prime, then it is still, I think, worthwhile to have them near the end. The question I have, and I think that all of us have, is whether he will be effective in the new MLS. And that is a decent question, but I think that it's almost interesting now because LA, the Galaxy are a galaxy, right? And they stand out as this team that, when other, like Atlanta and Toronto even, and other teams are going in a different direction now. The Galaxy are like, nope, we're still going to bring in this guy that was at a different level at the top of his career, and he's 35 now, but he still has enough left that we think he can do it. And it's interesting because it distinguishes them. It makes them kind of different. The Galaxy are coming to town. All right, we know what the Galaxy are. They're the team that have the aging superstars on them. Let's see if we can put them in their place. That's good.
LAFC versus LA Galaxy will be the MLS 3.0 versus MLS 2.0 in the flesh, almost. Yeah. But it is fascinating to me in a way that Even though, if you go back now, those comments from Don Garber of a few weeks ago takes a whole new level now with this. Remember when he was asked about Zlatan a few weeks ago? It's like, well, I don't know. Galaxy have to make sure that he's a good fit for their team right now. Is he? Will he be the difference maker on the field? I doubt. I think the 3 DPs and the 3 times they have, quote unquote, their 6 DPs, are pretty impressive for LA right now. But Zlatan has got the aura, the character, the charisma to fill that stadium to make one of those 6 guys a local market. And if this is the legacy of Zlatan with LA, to come into town and truly make Gio over the hump and make Gio the superstar that he thinks he is, well, Zlatan would have been useful.
Here's the thing about Zlatan. Before the injury, he was actually still an effective player at Manchester United. So he wasn't Zlatan of his peak. He wasn't Inter Zlatan. He wasn't even PSG Zlatan. But he was still an effective player. And he had the injury. I think that's the bigger question. If this had happened before he blew his knee out, then I'd have no problem whatsoever saying this is a difference maker coming into this league, even at his age. But now that he's blown the knee out, because one of the age doubles down at that point, because you just don't heal as fast when you're in your late 30s as opposed to your late 20s as opposed to your teens, right? And this is going to be difficult for him to overcome that injury. But he is, I think, hasn't come out loud to say it yet because he hasn't played enough to realize whether he'd be helpful to them or not. But I do think that he wants to come out of retirement to play for Sweden in the World Cup if he can effectively get in there. So he will be motivated at the start of this, to prove something and to show the Swedish folks that he's still going to be a difference maker for them. And they're in the World Cup, and I don't think he expected that.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people expected that.
Well, you're him. You're like, well, I'm not going to play there. They're not going to make the World Cup. Of course not. I'm not there. So, of course I'm not going to make it. And then they're like, they made it. Well, maybe I should come back because they made it. No, but the feeling, too, you mentioned of the motivation, the timing of this DP, well, it's not DP, he's going to be just a player with big salary on Tam Mogam, but the timing of this is weird, right? Mid-March, late March. Usually it's a signing you have in the off-season or in the summer. The motivation with the timing, I believe, is from Zlatan's part. He's not going to playing right now. He's barely touched the pitch for United over the last year and a half. So, all year. So him wanting to play now and prove himself, he's got just a few months to show the coach of Sweden that, look, I can help. I'll be there to give you guys a hand. Pick me. Choose me. So he might, like you said, be very motivated once he comes. But he's going to face the famous MLS wall that is a mix of turf mixed with travel. So you're going to face that really quickly, though.
Yeah, look, no, there's certainly challenges, particularly with the guy with the blown knee, and I suspect that they'll hold him off turf. As much as I reject the notion turf's more dangerous for your knee, based on the research that I've read, that's what they do. I have not done any research on it, but I have read a lot of research papers on there because let's talk about turf, baby.
Yeah,
At any rate,
2015.
Yeah, oy. However, that's the perception's reality when it comes to the turf argument. That's what I've always admitted, and they're going to probably keep him off the turf facilities, and they will probably limit his training time even a little bit too, particularly if he does go to the World Cup and he comes back. I suspect that they will be very careful with him to have him, if they're safely in a playoff zone at that point, they'll probably rest him for portions. So don't expect him to make every trip, like especially for those of us out east. I don't think that he would necessarily make all of those flights because the Galaxy will likely want to hold him back a little bit for the games that really matter at the end of the year. My question with Zlatan won't necessarily be this year. As I said, I think he's going to be motivated to come in. He's not going to want to embarrass himself. He has a reputation to uphold. If he falls flat in his face in MLS, that's going to sort of restrict some of his not completely, but it's going to put a little bit of a wet blanket over his kind of reputation, and it's certainly going to eliminate him probably from World Cup contention. So he's going to come in and try and be motivated for that. My question with him will be how motivated he's going to be in 2019. It is a 2-year deal, so we'll see. But as I said, it's interesting. It is. It's interesting to see this guy come in and to see whether he can do. Will he be Pirlo or will he be Villa? I mean, or something in between.
Yeah, so you got Villa at one point, you got Pirlo at the other, you got Lampard right in the middle. Which one is he?
Exactly. Well, Lampard he's a hard one to get a handle on because he did actually score a lot of goals off his bum in that first bit when he did play.
So
which is how he scored at Chelsea. So hey.
Exactly. We'll take a very short break, and when we come back, our games of the weekend.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
The international break that is not really a break or not really international, especially if you're American this time around, that's how we felt. That's how we usually feel as Canadians. Just not a game. But Canada's playing New Zealand tomorrow at 11 a.m. We've talked about it already. But New England, NYC at 1:30 p.m. tomorrow. Just 5 games in MLS tomorrow. 6 actually in the weekend. So Duane, when you got New England and NYCFC, any chance to put any money on New England, or should you just listen to your head and go with New York?
I mean, it's MLS, so that's, there's always a chance. You're saying there's a chance. There really is always a chance. But you look at New York's form, it's really quite remarkable right now. They have a chance to go 12 points up on TFC.
Ooh, ouch.
Not even a month in. I mean, TFC 0-2, obviously, not the start they wanted, but, I think most people still think they'll be near the top and be the two teams fighting at the top of this table. So for them to go 12 points up will be, that's a lot. That's a lot of points. It's going to be a long time before they can reel that in the way that the MLS works. But certainly I think NYCFC has started the season very well with NYCFC. NYCFC are like the Raptors. They're like the Washington Capitals, 2 teams that I follow, that it doesn't matter what they do in the regular season. It's only going to matter what they do at the end because they completely crapped the bed 2 years in a row in the playoffs. So that's what it's going to be with them.
The San Jose Sharks of MLS. New York City.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Moving on to the other game after that, 3:30 p.m. on Saturday, Eastern time, of course. Dallas versus Portland. Will Dallas replicate their game and their result of last week? Who knows?
Well, Portland's more interesting to me because this is the team that I picked at the top of the West, top of the East. That'd be impressive. Top of the West really in the preseason poll, and he started 0-2, and they haven't looked good. I mean, it's not that they're like Toronto's 0-2, but you can look at them playing in the CCL and go, they're probably going to be fine. Portland's looked pretty crappy, particularly at the back. So I'm going to be watching this game with looking at Portland because they're an interesting team. Dallas, it's actually a fairly decent start for them. They are looking to bounce back, obviously, from what was a very disappointing end of the season last year. They should be a playoff team based on what is there. I don't think that they're a championship team without a true game breaker on that squad, and they're unlikely to get that anytime soon because of their financials. But Portland is the team to watch here. And hey, if you're a Portland fan, maybe you're saying at least we got the Thorns by the end of the day. I don't know. If they go 0-3, it's going to be something interesting.
Speaking of 0-3, or the exact opposite that could continue to happen for Columbus. Columbus at home versus DC United. We've talked about, they're going to be distracted with all those going on. Or could be the exact opposite, and whatever's going on, the controversy in the pre-court and PSV and Dem Austin is actually galvanizing the troops and focusing them behind one goal and winning games. So maybe Columbus is not going to finish in the bottom of the East.
And obviously, this being a Columbus playing, there is an event in Austin as well to try and draw up support there. Because why would you ever support your home team? Why support the team where they are now? Just focus on the future if you're pre-court. At any rate, no. Columbus is good. Again, we didn't pick them near the bottom. I picked them as a bubble team. You picked them lower.
Yeah, I picked them as the wooden spoon in the East. But maybe my crystal ball was a little dirty that day.
Yeah, so I know they're a good team, and Arturo is a great player. Zardes is proving all the doubters wrong, all the haters wrong. DC is awful. So yeah, that means the United's clearly going to win. That's how almost works.
Yeah, exactly. Red Bull and Minnesota at home for Red Bull.
Right, Minnesota.
I know, right? I'm actually, why not? Let's go, Loons. Fly. Migrate to New York and go get another 3 points.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's not going to happen. New York's amazing. New York's pretty good. But Colorado, Kansas City. Which one will it be? We've seen Kansas City score a bunch of goals this season. and we've seen Tim Howard struggle this season. Well, which is going to give? Is Kansas City?
This is only their second game. God. Colorado.
Because they were in the CCL, remember?
Yeah.
You beat them.
It's, God, MLS and their schedule makes me insane. How, like that. Is that
it's week 2, have a bye.
I guess it is. They're also, it's because of winter. Like this is the whole, like, we're talking about winter schedule and all that, not to beat that dead horse, but it's like these teams that are in northern climates, they end up starting the season with like 10 games in hand with these other clubs at times. It makes it very difficult to handicap a lot. So anyway, who God knows. SKC's look pretty good offensively. I don't know what they're doing defensively this year. But,
not a whole lot. Hey. That's what they're doing. Not a whole lot.
Yeah, it's working for them so far. So we'll see. The West, I don't think the West looks very good. That's my overall take of the early part of the season. Is the West looks shaky. Like there's a lot of kind of not much there, and it's hard to even see who the dominant team is. I mean, LAFC has got those 2 wins, but the depth is still an issue.
Yeah.
When the Whitecaps are 2 wins, but I don't really trust the Whitecaps yet. Kansas City, the defensive issues. There's a lot of questions in the West right now.
How do you say it? Lowest common denominator? Yeah, that's the Western Conference in 2018 in Major League Soccer. And the last game this weekend in Major League Soccer is Saturday night. Vancouver at home versus LA Galaxy. Well, Zlatan, no, of course not. He won't be there. And even if he was, he'll never play at BC Place. You can scratch that off your calendars right now. Never gonna happen. Zlatan will not play Saturday night.
No, he will not. He won't travel. He won't even be in LA yet, I doubt. But exactly. I'm sure that they'll have a big press event next week sometime for him, is what will happen with that. They're holding him back to sit on the sidelines and make 10 minutes against LAFC. That's absolutely what this timing is about. Well, I mean, the timing is about the fact that United bailed out of the Champions League, so he had nothing more to stick around for. He wanted to be part of the Champions League contending team, and once United fell out of that competition, they sort of said, well, we might as well part ways now because you're not in our plans in the future, and they were really keeping him around because they wanted to give him that opportunity to be part of that. Yeah, they'll debut him next week. They'll have him roll out probably for a cameo appearance against LAFC, and it begs the question how much this is marketing and how much of this is football related if they do in fact roll him out with barely any training for a few minutes against their new rival. I don't know how rivalry can it really be? They don't really. Teams existed for 2 games, but nonetheless.
Well, they
called
each other.
It was the Classico. What do we figure they're going to call the derby?
I don't know. The Venice Beach Battle. I don't know how you can call it. The Santa Monica. I don't know, something. The Battle of the Pier, maybe Santa Monica Pier. I don't know. Anyways, to finish the show, Duane, I wanted to mention as well, Zlatan Ibrahimovic will be in Montreal on May 21st when the Galaxy visit the Montreal Impact at Stade Saputo. It's the 1 year where Galaxy comes and 1 year we go there. This year they come. And we're going to see Zlatan probably play in Montreal on May 21st because it'll be at Stade Saputo. It's outdoors and it won't be that cold. So I wouldn't be surprised to have Zlatan play against the Impact on May 21st.
Unless he's on the World Cup roster.
Unless he's on the World Cup.
It's about still the time early. They release them.
Yeah,
actually, that might be the last game before the release, actually, when I think about it. So, yeah.
Exactly, because it's closer to fly to Russia from Montreal than LA, so that's something too.
Yeah, maybe I'll make the trip up. I didn't go to the trip up for the derby. If Zlatan is playing there, I'll go have I wonder how they'll handle the media for him.
The derby.
That's legit.
Oh, they're going to do a press conference. Or not, You know what I was shocked? Here, let's say this to finish the show. They didn't give any special treatment to Drogba back then. He wanted to at the beginning. They're like, yeah, no, man. This is like on the CBA. This is written black and white. You kind of have to talk to the media in the locker room. Sorry. He's like, oh, okay then. And that's going to be the same shock Zlatan sees when he comes out of the shower the first time. Like, what? Yeah. What are you guys doing here?
It's I know that with Beckham, I was at the Beckham. Beckham only played 2 games in Toronto in the entire time that he was in the league, which is remarkable because he was in the league for several years that Toronto was in the league. He played the CCL game, obviously, and he played 1 regular season game here. And the CCL game, they didn't have any access to him because the CCL works under different media rules. They just have the mix zone, right? But for the MLS regular season game that he was here, they made sort of an arrangement that they had a press event the day before the game where we went down to Skydome. We went down into the Skydome Hotel, which is where the teams were staying at the time. And we waited in this side room for forever. And then eventually he just wandered himself in. He's a tiny little man, by the way, at any rate. And we all had a minute with him. And we asked some questions. And it was, we had the LA Galaxy people yelling at us before that we weren't to ask any non-soccer questions because half of the media there was like e-talk and like
like it was in Montreal. Remember that debacle? Yeah, I remember the journalist coming up to her and making her boxer sign.
Bosch was pregnant at the time or something. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, there was something about a pregnancy. So obviously, the e-talk people, I kind of felt bad for them in one hand because they were there to get a story that they were assigned a story that the media people were telling them they couldn't ask. And they were like, well, this is my job. So they asked this question anyway, and then they got yelled at, and they're like, well, honestly, what are you going to do? I have my take.
Are you going to kick me out? Exactly.
Yeah. So what, are you going to rip the stuff out of my hand there? And then it was funny because they go, okay, well, Bruce Arena's up next, and then all but like 2 people left.
Well, that always happens whenever Bruce Arena shows up. That's what I would do.
So I had a one-on-one with Bruce Arena, who is the most arrogant man on earth. But at any rate.
I remember last year. That was not fun when I had to talk to him last year. I feel the same way. All right, well, that'll be enough for today. We'll be back at 11 a.m. today for 5 Rings. It's our Paralympic review, and we'll have a few discussions on United 2026 and maybe Calgary 2026 as well. But as always, until next time, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. You can listen to the show live Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. on YouTube at youtube.com/sports podcasting network. And you can support us. You can help us do even more. You see the brand new virtual set all around me. It's a brand new studio. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Looks almost professional. And this is all made possible with your contributions, with your help that gives us more time to focus on our craft, to do research, to learn, and to feel good about ourselves as well. And you know what? That is very important. And you have the power to do that right at your fingertips. Patreon.com/sports podcasting network. $1 a month or more goes a long way. And as always, until Monday morning for the return of Soccer Today, well, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.